Stories of life told by photographers.
We all lead busy lives, connected by the highest speed possible to every means of communication available. Everything clamours for our attention: texts, email, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and time simply slips through our fingers. As we're texting or pressing like, we stop being in the present moment because we're worrying about the last one and the next one, never being grateful for the moment we're in. My guest today said that. Paul Sanders, whose brand, if that isn't too much of a clinical term for what you're about to hear and experience, is all about discovering a stillness or still in you, in your work, and in your expression. Today's show is about the why, though with a glint in my eye, I do appreciate there's a how that helps us get to the why.
The Photowalk is brought to you by mpb.com. Quality used photo and video kit. Buy, sell, trade, create at mpb.com.
I've now made my move to Fujifilm full time, and so mpb.com now have my Canon R6s and some super glass that is, well, I think it's practically toured the world with me, some of it. And so it, or the glass that is, has, I think, its and their own history. And that is just one of the wonderful things about mpb.com. You know that there's quality kit there with its own story, carefully and professionally inspected before it comes out to you. And if my 1.885 comes to you, well, treat it with a love that I did, because it's been a faithful storyteller for me on many a trip, both personal and professional. If lenses could talk, what amazing stories they might share. Now, the Extra Mile edition for our patrons, those I like to call the Extra Milers, the one that came out on the Wednesday before this show, so a couple of days ago, number 26, if you're listening to this in the future, was called Finding Mum. And I described that in the introduction as the most personal podcast I've ever made, because it was a personal photo story and audio story about, well, finding mum. This is without a doubt one of the most meditative episodes of the Photowalk. I've spoken to war photographers, news photographers, celebrity portrait photographers, photographers who made pictures during the heady days of the punk revolt against mainstream music. I've spoken with one photographer who was a punk within that time, who went on to become a superb landscape professional. I've spoken with expedition and nature shooters, those who've chanced their luck against the kind of cold that gives you frostbite as you change film, or those who are not more than a handful of footsteps away from a polar bear without a screen between. Today my guest is someone you will know because he's a friend of the show, and I've spoken with him by Zoom. But if you want to get a real measure of his nature, a walk in and amongst woodland together is the best way, I think, to learn about his very distinct and calm approach. But it wasn't always like that. Paul Sanders is my guest, and he worked his way up the ladder to claim a prize of being pictures editor for one of the, if not the world's most respected newspaper, The Times. He was at the very top of a house of cards, which, as you'll know by the nature of a house made from cards, can topple all too easily. And they did. So today, a very honest story of and by a photographer who went from the top of one mountain to almost perishing at the top of another. To discover still was at the foot of a much more important figurative one. Discover still, the name of Paul's business, but equally two words that underline his approach to making pictures and living his life. My hope today is that you find yourself immersed in a special meandering conversation. Letters will come back to the show next week. This week it's just myself and Paul and you walking together. A photographer who understands the joy of awareness. Here's what's coming up in 90 seconds.
Today on the Photowalk.
And that's what working in a stressful environment is. The water gradually gets hotter and hotter and hotter around you until you can't cope anymore. Where can I go that's near, that there aren't very many people, and I'm certain it'll happen, and there's no coming back. and I just had beachy head. I was just existing in a person-shaped shell, but I wasn't a human being. We're all guilty of wanting more, wanting better, wanting bigger, wanting brighter. But that slowing down and having time to appreciate it, it was revolutionary for me. Creativity comes from within your vulnerability. As an artist, you make yourself vulnerable every time you put a picture out. If you look at photographers all the way through history, none of them would say they're the best they could be. You know, they've always got stuff to learn. In all the research that they did, they discovered these little phytoncides that you breathe in actually make you feel better. I photograph, for me, I create for creation's sake just things that please me. And there's a lot of discouragement in photography. A lot of discouragement. There's a lot of ego, a lot of protectiveness. Exposure doesn't matter. Focus doesn't matter. None of it matters if it conveys the feeling. I'm alive in a world that is alive, you know, and make photographs that share that joy. A simple life is often the most successful life. Photography is so much more than cameras. It's counselling, it's therapy, it's meditation, it's prayer, it's spiritual. It's a life force.
And because it's the first Friday of a new month, there's a new assignment set today and this month by Tim Booth.
Until you understand light, you're just burrowing about in the dark.
Stories of life told by photographers. I think we should join Paul somewhere under the canopy of woodland. I only found out today that you have shot weddings. I always thought that Paul Sanders, Pictures Desk editor, would sort of. I don't know why I knew you'd shot news, but I don't know why I didn't think that you hadn't shot weddings and all that sort of social work. But you have.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know many photographers who haven't shot a wedding, but yeah, one of my very first sort of roles was shooting subcontract weddings for a company in Coventry. That was me wanting to be desperately a photographer.
Subcontract weddings?
Yes. They had an office in the high street,
right.
And if you wanted to get married, you would turn up, part with your £500, and they would send one of 8 photographers along. So the person behind the desk never actually shot a wedding, although it was their name above the studio. In fact, they weren't even a photographer. Didn't know one end of a camera from another.
How life has changed in terms of, I think clients. This isn't a wedding photography podcast, but I think clients have become a bit more picture literate, and I'm not sure many clients these days would accept Frida or Fred blogs to go out and do their wedding, not knowing at all who they'd got on the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think in those days it was you paid your money and you were just given a photographer. There were people who did high-end weddings, but not in the same way that people do now.
So it wasn't Paul Sanders high-end wedding photographer?
No.
Right.
It was, 5 rolls of 120 on a Saturday morning, wedding at 10:30, and then another 5 rolls for a 3 o'clock wedding.
Oh.
It was a proper sausage factory.
Yeah. But you didn't have to do the long nights. You weren't there
No.
photographing the falling down juice stuff later.
No, the cake cutting was the final picture.
Yeah.
And that was always stunted.
Yeah. Stunted?
Stunted, yeah.
Set up.
As in set
Right.
up, yes.
Yeah.
Stunted set up, yes.
You meant a small cake.
Tiny cakes. Cupcakes.
That's it. Cupcake towers, they cost more than the actual proper cakes
Exactly,
now.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
So I kind of cut my teeth on weddings, and it was quite handy because it was working with people, and from there I went into doing sort of fashion and glamour stuff, which is very un-PC now.
Yeah.
The glamour stuff, but I learned a lot about posing and working with people, shooting weddings.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I hate shooting weddings. It's a nightmare. It's a pressure I would never want.
Yeah.
But I think it's far more scary now, actually, if you do one on digital, because you end up with thousands of photos. The joy of only having 60 frames in total and handing your rolls over to somebody else to process was quite freeing.
So you didn't have to do any of the processing?
No, or build the album.
Wow.
Or...
How can I get myself a job like this?
I'll open a shop in the high street. call it Joe Blogs Weddings.
Now, it's interesting you talk about, the pressures of photography, in that case, it being wedding photography, because we're going to talk a lot about pressure today and slowing down, a meditative approach to photography and mindfulness. I should really ask you, and this should have been my opening question, where the devil are we? If you hear, by the way, helicopters, aircraft and various other things, that's because we're not a million miles away from London Gatwick, which is about as close to London as Newbury.
You're right there, yeah. So we're in Starfirst Woods, which is a small area of what used to be National Trust woodland, but it isn't anymore, which borders onto my house. It's where I make quite a lot of my pictures. I love it here. Yeah. And I often come for a walk and just amble around and stop, pause, make a picture, carry on, write some thoughts down. I just enjoy the atmosphere because it's quiet.
Yeah. Well, there's nobody here today at all,
apart from us two. Yeah. And we're not making a lot of noise.
No. But during you told me that during lockdown, this was like Piccadilly Circus.
Oh, it was mad. There were so many people. I mean, you literally couldn't walk along without sort of bumping into people every couple of 100 yards. And they were all people who had driven here. The road was lined with cars for people taking their 1 hour exercise, which seemed to last most of the day.
So people walking these woods had never actually walked in woodland in their life prior to that time.
A lot of people wandering around looking lost.
Yeah. What's that? Is that a tree?
Trees and bluebells. Yeah.
That time, though, was
coming up.
The bluebells. Oh, yeah. We're springing early.
We are springing.
That time, your life changed, and we'll get to the real life change story in a moment, but your life changed quite a lot during that period. You set up a side of your business that you probably wouldn't have thought could exist prior to lockdown, and that you had to make a decision to teach mindfulness and landscape online, which doesn't feel or sound very immersive.
It doesn't, but weirdly, it was much more immersive than I ever thought. It was my accountant that forced me to do it, because I was quite happy to sit in the corner with my feet up. But that doesn't pay the bills.
No.
And bringing it online, the mindfulness side wasn't too bad. The problem that people have is that we can't travel, we can't do anything, there's nothing to photograph. Whereas actually it was the prime time to start looking and seeing what's on your doorstep and working with what you've got rather than what you wish you had. And we're all guilty of wanting more, wanting better, wanting bigger, wanting brighter. But that slowing down and having time to appreciate it was revolutionary for me. I mean, one of the few people who actually got a lot out of the lockdown thing. And it did change my business completely, because before that I was racing around the world doing workshops for Light and Land, which was great fun. But it was always about the photo.
Yeah.
Where are we going to get the picture? What's the picture here? Why have we stopped? Tripods at dawn, tripods in a line. Yeah. And that's not speaking badly of those kind of workshops, but I started to get a bit disillusioned. And lockdown really came at the right time for me, because it allowed me to shift my priorities into what I'm really passionate about, without compromise. And I think that's where the joy in your heart comes from, being able to do what you love and, make a little bit of a living from it, but share it with others. For me, photography is about sharing, enjoying the experience, and an image. It doesn't matter what image, an image. It doesn't matter how you make it, what you make it of. It doesn't have to be anything that gets points or likes or validation. It's just something that makes your heart sing on a particular day at a particular time.
It's interesting that you brought a camera out today. When I said to Paul just before we headed out, I said, well, we might take a few, because it's strange that when I've done these photo walks with guests live, as it were, not through Zoom, we've gone for a photo walk, and I think there's been times, certainly with Jason Florio, I don't think neither of us ended up taking a picture. We saw pictures, but we didn't make them. And I asked Paul, I said, what have you brought with you? Expecting him to pull out a GR3 because I knew it was in his pocket. But go on, surprise us.
I've got a Polaroid SLR,
Yeah.
which is quite tatty and a bit old, but has been recently refurbished.
Yeah.
And I'd forgotten the joy of Polaroids. I love the fact that they are they're so imperfect.
Yeah.
And that imperfection brings something so new and warm. I mean, they're not even sharp.
No.
They look like they might be. I mean, it's got focus on it, and it looks like it might be sharp. But when they come out, they're not sharp.
No.
But that's the beauty of it. That's what's so nice, is they're not crisp and nobody cares.
Is it right you don't have a digital camera?
I don't have a digital camera, no, at the moment.
Not at all.
No.
Your phone, I suppose, is one, but that would be it.
Yes, yeah. I am going to get a digital camera just to scan my negatives in.
Right.
Because the methods that I've used so far have been a bit unsuccessful. But yeah, I got rid of all my digital kit in June last year. I've not opened Lightroom since June.
Wow. Good heavens.
And I just got really bored with it. Everywhere you go, people talk about how sharp your lenses are,
Yeah.
what camera do you use, what settings do you have it on, what meter mode do you use, what film simulation. And I just thought, what, it's not about what we see, how we see, what we feel about what we see anymore. It's about, how big my camera is, how sharp it is, how many million pixels I've got and what array they are in. I mean, I don't even understand half of it.
You were, like I am now, a Fujifilm shooter.
Yes.
There was an awful lot of shoot for so long about the worms. I don't know whether you even know. Oh, you do? Yeah.
Yes.
I was wondering whether you knew that debate, which was all about sharpening and the files coming out the camera sharp. So when you over-sharpen a sharpened image, it begins to sprout worms. You probably wouldn't be aware of the new AI advances in Lightroom if you haven't opened it for
I've
all that
heard
time.
about them.
Yeah.
But no, I haven't done anything with Lightroom.
So you'd probably be even...
I'm probably a few versions behind now.
Yeah. And you'd probably, in some form of horror, think, AI? What can I possibly...
I know what AI is, artificial intelligence,
Yeah, yeah.
because that's how I class myself. People say, "Oh, you're so intelligent and wise." I'm like, no, it's all an act. It's all
artificial.
It's all artificial. Yeah.
Does AI worry you, though, for photography? And I know not you personally, because, of course, you've dumped your digital gear and you haven't used Lightroom, but do you think it's a thing that we should be concerned about as photographers, and that one day we might not even be making the pictures? It'll be a button on our jacket and some sort of algorithm that decides what are the best pictures, and while we have a cup of tea, it'll produce the pictures for us.
It'll produce the picture you want. I mean, wouldn't that be lovely?
Would it?
No, I can't think of anything worse. It'd just be hell. I don't think... I mean, I have to be careful how I say this, I suppose. Actually, no, I don't. For me, I find that kind of thing just wrong, personally. But there are people who can't go to places, who can't get out, who it would help them get into a way of being creative. So I can see the attraction of it to some people. I think where it's used to make a perfect photograph, if such a thing ever existed, I find that a bit lame. But where it's used to sort of enhance a creative expression, I think that's okay. If you think back to the days of darkroom printing, I mean, the Russians used to paint people out and in and do all sorts of things with their Cold War pictures. And I don't see a problem with photographic manipulation. I think just as long as people are honest about it and say, do you know what, this is my interpretation of, or my expression of whatever it was in front of me. And I've used Photoshop or Lightroom or AI in the same way that you could take a print and paint on it or draw on it or scratch the emulsion off or, whatever. Creative expression is a fabulous thing and it shouldn't be stifled, and technology will just bring it out more. What is needed is authenticity from people who use it and say, do you know what, this is how I've created it, rather than some people do pretend that every time they go out the light is golden and wonderful. And You know, if you want that kind of perfection in your life, if you need it, that's fair enough.
My wife is a bit of a Richard Osman fan for his writing.
Yeah.
Maybe for him on television. I don't know.
Probably.
Maybe. But I asked her the question. I said, that book that I bought you for Christmas, if the book jacket said Richard Osman, but in some sort of small way where you'd have like a copyright circle, if it said AI in there, i.e. it was the AI Richard Osman, would you feel differently about it? And she said, yeah, I wouldn't read it.
Yeah. I wouldn't buy a photograph or invest in a photograph that had been created artificially by a robot or by an algorithm or a piece of software. It just doesn't fire up my loins in any way, shape or form, unlike Richard Osman.
I want to cast your mind back. It's a story that you and I have talked about before on a podcast, right at the start of the title, actually. So forgive me if you have heard that episode, but I believe we always have new other listeners, as I call them these days. The start of your story, the start of this bit of your story.
Yeah.
You were working as a pictures editor, so we'll go with the abridged working as a pictures editor bit if you can possibly fill in some gaps there.
Yeah.
But then take me to a particularly pivotal moment where you stood on a cliff that's called Beachy Head.
Yeah, I mean, I'd always wanted to get to the top, whatever the top is of my career, and for me that was being the picture editor of a national newspaper. The pressure that I put on myself to perform, to be the best, I set precedents that I couldn't fulfill, basically got to a point where it broke me. And when I left the Times, I just felt like a complete failure. My marriage had dissolved and wasn't seeing my son much, wasn't really achieving anything, and I just lost my way completely.
Well, what sort of person were you? What had you become?
I was nothing like I am now. I'd sort of become a shell. I'd become defined by my job. The job title was me. I mean, even friends used to introduce me as picture editor of the Times, not this is Paul, my mate.
Right.
I just felt empty. I'd got all this kudos with this great job, and paid really well, really sort of enjoying allegedly what I was doing, but I wasn't. My life was it was soulless.
So was there an act? If I'd have met you at that stage, I'd have thought, Paul's a lovely chap. What a busy bloke. But I wouldn't have been meeting the real Paul.
No, the real Paul never came out.
Right.
The real Paul was kept behind a wall.
Okay.
And behind that wall was a box that he lived in, and he wasn't let out. The real Paul is far too sensitive to work in that environment, far too shy, doesn't have enough confidence, and suffers massively with inferiority complex.
Oh.
You have to put on an act. I think everybody in that environment puts on an act. You have to be the be-all and end-all, the big thing. I tried at times to let my caring side come out, but it just didn't fit with the environment.
I always think of people that work in press at that high level as almost a bit fierce. They have I know you're chuckling now, but as a pictures editor, you were looking at something like 20,000 images a day. This does not sound like the workings of a patient, gentle man.
No, I wasn't. I wasn't that patient, and I wasn't that gentle. But I wasn't. I'd like to think I wasn't abusive. But you have to take really tough decisions. That's what people don't understand. When you're at that level, you're making all kinds of decisions every minute of every day to try and get the best out of the people that work for you, with you, that you're going to make the paper look great, and you end up arguing with your photographers, with your picture desk team. You end up arguing with the editor of the newspaper, the news desk, the backbench, the subs. Every day was a battle.
Yeah.
It was literally, you go in the morning, you put your armour on, you prepare to go to war.
Wow.
And I don't know, there was something about it to start with. The cut and thrust was fun, but it was it was needless. A lot of it we could have done quite easily. People shouting, have you got a better headshot of such and such? I'm like, It's a headshot. It fits the shape beautifully. Do we need a different one? And then they would go, put the new one in, and then they'd change it back to the old one. There's no trust. You know, they always have to push you and push you and push you. They think you're not giving enough. And you end up giving so much that there's nothing left to give to yourself or your family or your friends. You know, I stopped seeing my friends. I barely saw my wife and child while I was there. You know, we had cancelled holidays. They would go off without me. You know, I'm not surprised my marriage broke down. And you have to sort of wonder, is it worth it? And that was the thing that sort of started nagging in my head. You know, you've lost yourself in this. You know, where are you going? What are you doing this for? And it was all for the ego. I became frightened of not being the picture editor of the Times.
Yeah. Did you quit, or did the position become untenable between all parties, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't mind you asking. I left.
Right.
I timed my leaving quite well.
Right.
To work in with some voluntary redundancy stuff that was coming about.
Right.
And I just thought, you know what? I don't want to be here anymore.
Did it surprise people?
Yes. People were surprised, mainly because I had mouthed so well how I was feeling inside that, you know, when I said that I was really suffering, you know, with insomnia and depression and all the rest of it, people weren't aware. And that really surprised me, because I looked like death warmed up.
Right.
You know, but I think if you approach something very gradually, people don't notice the changes. You know, they say that if you put a frog in boiling water, it will scream and leap out. But if you heat the water from cold to hot very slowly, the frog won't realise that the water's getting hotter and hotter and hotter.
It is.
Yeah. And that's what working in a stressful environment is. The water gradually gets hotter and hotter and hotter around you until you can't cope anymore. I think people had just seen me looking a bit pale, looking a bit tired, but everybody else in the office looks the same. You know, there's a pallor. And that, for me, was a huge turning point, because I literally felt like I'd given up on everything that I'd valued. All my energy as a photographer from the early 90s had been geared towards working at that newspaper and getting the top job. And I wasn't mercenary about it, but I was very dedicated to it, and I would take any opportunity I could to get there. But when you get to the top of the mountain and you suddenly realise there isn't somewhere that does nice coffee and cake, and actually once you're there, there's another mountain right behind it that you've still got to keep climbing. It just, I think it defeated me. I just couldn't see the purpose in what I was doing. And if you get on the train at the end of the day and you see yesterday's work in the bin, those newspapers have amazing value.
I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah, you see, you know, if you think about, you've argued and argued and argued for a picture to go in the paper. You've had a photographer, you know, perhaps in a really difficult situation, you know, now probably somewhere like Ukraine, risking their life, and then you get on the train at the end of the day and you see that morning's paper screwed up in the bin. You know, honestly, it makes you think, what the hell are we doing? Is it worth all that heartache, the angst, the anger, the bitterness? You know, we produce a really good paper and it just gets thrown away.
Well, one of the, you know, if not the most revered in the world.
Yes, yeah. And it was a real privilege to work for the Times. Had I not worked for the Times, I wouldn't be doing what I am now. So although I ended up, like you say, on Beachy Head, ready to take my own life, I wouldn't be here now had it not been for the Times. So it's not a bad thing. And people say, oh, you must really hate it. And I don't buy it. I don't even read newspapers anymore, weirdly. Having read them all every day for years. I look back and I think, well, I'm actually grateful I went through the experience, because it's made me a better person. It's made me stronger, I'm more resilient, and in many ways I'm much richer as a person. I have a much deeper connection with the real me inside me. And
the real people that you had as a relationship in your life and lost for a while.
Yes, that's it. You know, and I think that's really important. And often we forget, in the march to succeed, in the march for, you know, whatever else it is, the busyness of our lives, what is important, you know, that connection with the people that we love, and the connection with our children, with the world around us, and just being truly grateful for it.
Yeah. Was it a day or a night? I'm sorry to be so specific. I'm trying to get a picture in my mind about Beachy Head that day. And how on earth you made that decision? Did you go to Beachy Head with a rather grim feeling that something horrible might happen? Or did you go there because it is out of the way and just, it's a beautiful place too?
It is, yeah, it's very beautiful. I tried unsuccessfully to take my own life a couple of months before the Beachy Head incident.
Right.
And I had a plan. And I'd worked very hard at my plan, which involved cycling in a mountain in France. But I used to do a lot of endurance cycling. So,
Right.
and my plan was to climb to the top of this mountain, and then when you're going up a mountain on a road bike, you unclip the brakes to stop them catching on the wheels.
Okay.
So you don't have anything kind of stopping you. My plan was to get to the top of the mountain and not reclip the brakes, so that I just came down the mountain and flew off the end, and it was a tragic cycling accident. Right. So therefore, the insurances would pay out and all the rest of it.
You really had thought about it?
Yeah, I thought about it really carefully. And strangely, my mum called me when I stopped at the top to have a cup of coffee and a cake. And she said, "Don't you do anything stupid." Oh. And from that point on, I thought, this is how weird your mind works. I'll be in such trouble with my mum. And knowing my mum, she would have probably found me. So I came home, but in a right mess.
Yeah.
And I just thought, right, where can I go? Where can I go that's near, that there aren't many people, and I'm certain it'll happen, and there's no coming back. And I just thought Beachy Head. So I went down one evening, I took my camera out, put it on its tripod, watched the sun go down. And the weird thing is with Beachy Head that it is so busy. Honestly, it was like every person and their dog had gone for a walk that night. And I didn't...
Not always like that, because I've been there and sometimes it's absolutely quiet.
You probably weren't planning to do something daft.
No.
You know, that sort of feel of the place, I just... I literally felt like I'd lost everything, and I was really awful at everything, and I felt like a complete failure. And I knew that I had no place being here. That was what I was telling myself. So having set up to take a picture, I just thought, well, once it's quietened down, I can just go for it and do it. But as being a failure with most things, I managed while I was pacing and waiting and waiting and waiting I literally did kick my light meter towards the edge of the cliff, and I still don't know why I jumped to get it, but I dived to get it and I missed it, and it went over the edge, and it just shattered.
Smashed, yeah.
And I just thought, Christ, that's going to really hurt. And honestly, I just sat back down and just burst into tears, because I knew I wouldn't be able to, having seen that just then, wouldn't be able to go through with it. And I honestly didn't know how I was going to carry on with life, because I couldn't go back to being a picture editor or a news photographer. I couldn't go back into the marriage. I had no idea what I was doing, where I was going. And I was just in tears at the edge of the cliff. And, suddenly this chap just came and sat next to me and was asking me if I was okay, and wanted to make sure I wasn't going to do anything. And he spent, I don't know how long it was, it seemed like hours talking to me. I suddenly just got this feeling that actually I wasn't meant to die. Mm. I needed to carry on. I had no idea of what the point of carrying on was, but I knew that I wasn't going to quit.
No.
And I had a lot of help after that.
He was a guardian angel, that chap.
He was. I mean,
am I right in thinking you've never spoken to him since?
No.
But you'll have no idea what a difference he made that night.
No, he made a huge difference.
Wow.
I can't even remember his name. I mean, the whole thing seems... It's almost like watching a movie back. And, my memory is terrible since those incidents. But, I owe him so much for just stopping and pausing and saying, are you okay? And all it takes when somebody is that low is somebody to go, Is there anything you need? And I think it helps if it's a stranger, because I literally just offloaded on him.
Yeah.
The poor guy probably just out for a walk with his dog and has gone home. Not all heroes wear capes. That's the important thing to remember.
So from there, then you had a lot of help. You said
Lots of help. Yeah.
How many years did it take to come around to? We're going to talk a lot about where you are now and mindfulness and the wonderful workshops and the things that you do now, the positive side of life and how life has changed for you. But how long did that take to come back to normal planet Paul?
But it still hasn't quite got to the end of the process.
Okay.
If there is ever an end, I think you just learn to manage what's going on better. You have tools that you're equipped with that help you deal with the ups and downs. Ups and downs are natural in life. So I'm fortunate now that rather than being on a roller coaster, I'm just on a kind of gentle merry-go-round. I would say it's probably been 6-7 years.
Wow.
It was a very slow process, because sometimes you go forward a couple of steps and then you get knocked back a good 10-15 steps. Sometimes you think you're going in the right direction and you suddenly feel that you're going in the wrong direction, and a lot of you keeps calling things into question.
Yeah.
But sort of normal-ish Paul, he's about, and I talk about mental health a lot, which I sometimes think might put people off, because it's such an important subject and it's not talked about enough in the realms of normal people, normal people like us.
Yeah.
And certainly for men it's a really big thing. There's a lot of stigma attached to it, because you're seen as a bit of a snowflake if you're kind of a bit broken.
I'd like to think that's changing.
It is. Yeah, it's got a lot better.
Yeah.
But there is still a stigma about it, and there shouldn't be, but there is, and some people are scared of it. Some people think it might be catching. It's a funny thing, because people have said to me, the more you hang around with depressed people, the more depressed you're likely to be, and because you're sharing an experience, you can also lift each other up.
Yeah.
That shared experience of I've felt similar. You suddenly realise you're not alone. And mental health struggles are a lonely, lonely place, because trying to help people understand how you feel when you are completely numb to everything around you is really, really difficult. Because how do you describe, I can't feel anything? People go, well, you must be able to feel something. You just pick yourself up a bit, try and do something, but it's energy. It's a lot of effort just breathing in and out some days, and that's where you need that kind of understanding of other people that might have been through something similar.
A lot of people look up to you. I look up to you.
I think you're taller than me.
I knew you were going to say that.
Nothing is not predictable.
You come from the same Morecambe and Wise period that I do. But no, a lot of people regard you and what you do and what you say in your courses is very important. And I've got some personal friends now that are mentored by you. But you're somebody who doesn't shy from showing and sharing their vulnerability, as you're doing with me now. And there are some who might say, well, if you're trying to market yourself as a mindfulness expert, you can't show your vulnerability.
Well, I think if you don't show your vulnerability, you can never be a creative. Creativity comes from within your vulnerability. As an artist, you make yourself vulnerable every time you put a picture out. Every time you take a paintbrush and mark a board or write something, you're embracing your vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that we get over this thing of everything has to be amazing. We have to be successful before we've even started. We want to run before we can walk. Creativity is a journey of vulnerability. It's a journey of curiosity, of fun. It's really warming to hear that people look up to me, and I've never really...
You're walking me through a quagmire. Hang on, we won't be finishing the podcast. Somebody will have to come and rescue us. We're trying to have a serious moment here, Paul. You've turned us down an alleyway of mud. Now it's gone in my boot.
You've got to have the full experience.
I feel I'm having it.
Yeah, do you feel vulnerable?
My right foot feels wet.
We all want to be further along the road than we are. I mean, we're all on the same learning curve. You start as a beginner and you gradually move through and you become more experienced. But often now people want the perfect end result. They're so attached to the end result. They're afraid to fail. They're afraid to show their failures, their mishaps, their mistakes. You know, people delete off the back of the camera so that when they get home and edit, maybe it's saving them time editing.
Not really much, is it? That's the vanity side of it.
That's it. It's a vanity project.
You don't learn if you don't see your mistakes.
Exactly.
I mean, what about those amazing Magnum contact sheet books? It's just the most educational thing to see the greats made terrible shots on the way to the one good one.
Yeah, and you have to see that. You have to experience that not every picture's a winner.
Yeah.
And I find it's kind of a product of today's society in that everything has to be the finished article. It has to look amazing. There's no room for rawness. You know, we can't produce a photograph that doesn't look polished and finished. You can't hear a song that's made in a garage by a couple of guys playing really cheap guitars on a really bad amp.
Yeah.
You know, it has to be polished, it has to be finished, it has to be a high level of production.
I'm bound to ask if you feel, I'm sure you're going to say yes, that social media has created this.
I feel it has. Social media it's like a double-edged sword because it's really
exacerbated it.
Yeah, it's social media is a really great thing in some ways because it brings people together with a shared love or passion of things. But it also brings out the worst in people, and it brings out this need to collect followers or fans, or try and get engagement over somebody else, and all of it becomes a bit of a battle. It becomes all-consuming. Well, actually, we should be consumed by places like we are now. We're walking in the woods, and apart from the two people we passed earlier, we haven't seen a soul.
No.
We're accompanied by the birds.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in here to sort of say, I'm the best tree, I'm the brightest flower.
No.
It's all really imperfect. It's all really messy. And you imagine if we deleted all the trees that weren't straight or perfectly formed.
Oh, God.
What a really dull world it would be. What is it that motivates you to make a photograph? If it is purely the validation of others, then fair enough. I'm not going to argue with you, but it's deeper than that. Making pictures, making art, making poetry, it comes from inside your soul. And you can only harness that by really paying attention, by allowing yourself to bring a quietness to you so you can hear what's going on around you, so you can become aware, so your seeing can become refined, so you're not judging everything as not being good enough. You're looking at things and saying, is it interesting? Yes, it's interesting. Will it make a picture? Actually, probably not, but I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
Rather than going, that's not good enough, that's not good enough. These aren't good enough.
A photographer the other day I was speaking to said we're never the finished article.
No.
And he had embraced that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you look at photographers all the way through history, none of them would say they're the best they could be. They've always got stuff to learn. There's always more mistakes to make, more ideas to try. And you don't try a new idea and come out of it the first time with a brilliant image. So I think the journey of creativity is never done. The only time it stops is when we stop breathing.
Yeah.
And if you look around you at what is being created now, we're in spring, just about. Look, you've got all the bluebells coming through, the brackens starting, the ferns are starting. It's just amazing. Yeah. There's so much upward energy. And, people say I'm really woo-woo. They're like,
You should have a sign on your door.
Yeah.
Welcome to the woo-woo.
Yeah, I'm going to get a doorbell that goes woo-woo. And why shouldn't you touch a tree? Why can't you hug a tree?
Well, you remember years ago when Prince Charles first, got... it was completely unfashionable, wasn't it? The tree-hugging prince.
Exactly.
King Charles, as he is now, of course.
Yeah, vilified by the media.
Vilified, probably by your paper as well.
Very probably.
But things have changed.
Yeah.
I mean, I still think some people might find the concept of hugging trees one step too far, but returning to nature, and probably COVID helped people do this as well. Those lines of cars you had outside your house were, I suppose, on oh God, I'm going to sound woo-woo now, were on some kind of healing mission without knowing it.
I think that's spot on. You heal by being in nature. I mean, by rights, landscape photographers should be the healthiest bunch of people on the planet, because we spend so much time in nature, surrounded by it, breathing in the little phytoncides that come off the trees. And I think
what?
Phytoncides.
What's that?
They're...
Don't look at me like I...
You don't know what a phytoncide is?
I didn't listen at school.
I didn't listen at school either. Phytoncides are given off by trees. They're like tiny spores.
Okay.
And you breathe them in, and they're full of antibacterials, antioxidants, and things like that.
That's real?
It's real. It's a proven science.
Right.
So
never heard of it.
Yeah, the Japanese do this thing called forest bathing, which isn't an ancient thing.
No.
It's quite new. And in all the research that they did, they discovered these little phytoncides that you breathe in actually make you feel better. 2 hours spent in nature is as good as being on antidepressants.
No.
Yeah.
Blimey.
So just think how amazing you're going to feel after the end of today.
Well, then they say you learn something every day. Honestly, I did not know this.
Well, there you go.
I know that being in nature is good for the soul and good for mental health, but I didn't know there was an actual physical scientific thing going on.
Loads of research about it. Forest bathing is massive, and people go, "Oh, that's a bit weird." Actually, it's not. It's a walk in nature. And
That's all it is. It's not literally lying on the floor and looking up and repeating some mantra.
No. And I mean, photography in itself is meditation. And now people say, "Oh God, he mentions the M word. That means we've got to take our shoes off, grow a beard, walk around chanting in white capes and all the rest of it." Meditation is just paying attention to the present moment.
Yeah.
You know, the Buddhists do it by focusing on their breath. Photographers do it by focusing on their subject, by paying attention, by really being in the moment and not saying, "This isn't good enough to photograph. What is in this that I can photograph? What is in this tree, this trunk, these leaves that is fascinating?" And we deal in fascination.
Well, I'm going to ask you to stop now for a second.
Oh my goodness.
Look around you. Now, this is probably unfair because you've already said to me you can walk and not photograph.
Put me on the spot, aren't you?
Well, not really. I'm just thinking if I was looking around now, I also want to hear this amazing machine. So there's a slight excuse as well.
Okay.
There's a slight audio excuse.
Yeah.
But we've come to a kind of a crossroads, a T-junction in the path here. It's a chaotic scene.
Yeah.
I think if I was Simon Baxter...
Oh, Simon would love it.
I'd be thinking...
simplify it and make it beautiful.
He'd bring something out, wouldn't he? What is there something that right now would...
You know what fascinates me?
What?
This lovely tree.
Yeah.
You see how the bark is all sort of twisted?
Yeah.
Kind of spiralling up into the... And the rest of the tree is really interesting. But for me, the photograph would be in that twisty bit just down there.
It's almost like a sort of parasitic extra bit of the tree is clasped on, and but it's not. It is the tree, isn't it?
Somebody's kind of screwed it round as it's grown.
Who did that?
And you think, wow, look at that. It's all fibrous. It's like its muscles are really taut.
Yeah.
And it's kind of really straining against whatever it is. You know, there's a tension in that. And I love things where there's a bit of tension. How would I photograph it? No idea at the moment. Normally I would sort of sit and look at it for 15 minutes, half an hour,
Would
an
you?
hour.
Right.
Yeah. And it might be that today I've noticed it, but it might not be quite right. A bit like, you know, when you go and photograph something that's actually, can you come back tomorrow when I've not got a migraine?
Yeah.
It might be that the tree's not really feeling it. And this is where it does sound a bit woo-woo. Right? So you just go, okay, look, I've noticed you. I'll come back in a couple of days and have a little look. And then one day it will just feel right.
Does it not feel right at the moment?
For your audio bite, yes.
Otherwise, no.
Well,
it's a bit like asking a comic, you know, a comedian, tell us a joke. and they're thinking, I'm only thinking about shopping in Sainsbury's at the moment.
There's something in there that I really enjoy, and we'll go over, because the way I photograph is I don't get the camera out until right at the very end, But I get in with my hands, a bit like, do you remember David Bellamy?
Do, yeah.
Get in with your hands.
Do look up David Bellamy. I'll leave a link because he was a gorgeous personality.
But for those of you without vision, I'm now stroking the tree. But if you run your hands over it, you feel the texture of it.
And you do this when you photograph trees?
Yeah.
Right.
Because how do you photograph something and not know what it feels like? Because texture is so important in our pictures.
Well, there's a mossy side there, very mossy side. Then the bark breaks as you run your hand around it.
The moss grows, I think, on the south side normally, which is about right.
Right.
I think that's right, because that is definitely south. But, the other side, there's contrast, and then you've got all these little lichens that grow. And although it's this bit that fascinates me, this sort of sinuous thing, it might be that the picture comes out of somewhere else that gives the feeling of it. It might even be just the tiniest detail from it. And I don't go into it with a preconceived idea.
No.
It just catches my attention. And I always say if something catches your attention, it's worth pausing with it. Rather than going, oh, that's not a really good picture. Just pause with it and explore it. And as you look round, the sinewy bit gets even more sinewy. I mean, around here, it's really pronounced.
Yeah.
And even as you come up, I'm still running my hands up the tree. I cannot believe I'm explaining this.
No, this is good. This is audio gold.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's
visual gold as well, but I can't do two things at once.
But, if look down on it, look at the way it curves into the ground.
Yeah.
See the roots anchoring it.
It's leaning at almost, I would say, 45 degrees, this tree.
And yet it's sort of twisted. It's like the wind has got it. How it's done that over its lifespan, I find incredible.
Yeah.
It's not a straight tree. It's not a pretty tree. Don't even know what sort of tree it actually is.
I've got an app, if you want.
Have you? An app for sinewy twisted trees?
Yes, yeah. No, but that's not important, though, is it?
No. You don't need to label it. Minor White, who is my favourite photographer, says that if you spend long enough with something, it will reveal itself to you. That's not the exact quote, but it's along those lines.
Wow.
And it's basically about giving your attention to something fully. In the same way that, if, like we're having a conversation, I'm paying you full attention, you're paying me full attention. When you're with your photographic subject, you pay the attention to the subject. Not to your kit, not to your bag, not to the person who's with you. You pay all your attention to it and it'll reveal something to you. So it might be that the picture is just this tiny little mollusky thing that you've noticed.
Which I noticed,
Which is really beautiful. It looks like a little kind of the eye of a little reptile almost.
It could.
There's a little face type thing in there.
Yeah.
You might have to make a sketchbook image at some point.
Yeah.
No pressure on you.
You're the expert.
Well, I don't know so much about that. But I don't quite know what I would photograph. But when on our walk, we do come back this way to get out.
Yeah.
So it might be a little revisit. I'll let it sort of stew for a while, if that's okay.
Yes, please do. Yeah, because I don't want to change the way that you would otherwise think about it. But honestly, I've never touching the tree. I can understand.
Wrong.
Well, I can understand why people think, "Oh, that's a bit woo-woo." But actually, as you start to discuss it and start to understand it, and understand it from the context of other photographers like Minor White, you think, "Oh, hang on,
Yeah.
there's something here."
But if you think about it, it's not only Minor White. There's Minor White, yes, Harry Callahan, Paul Strand, Steiglitz, Ansel Adams.
Yeah.
They all did.
These are not small names.
They're not small names, and they weren't just about making great pictures. They were about living the experience of making the photograph, the experience of being there, surrounded by the enormity of nature, and somehow trying to get the essence of it onto a piece of film that they could then reproduce and share with the world. They weren't trying to be great photographers. They were trying to show the beauty of the world as the world then seemed to be speeding up and people were ignoring it. You imagine if they were in the world now, they'd be like, wow, when did we suddenly accelerate to 2,000 miles an hour?
Yeah.
We thought 35 was bad.
God, I wonder what Ansel would have made of
Yeah.
having to turn a picture out quickly for Instagram.
Exactly. Would he be on Instagram even?
Yeah.
Probably he would feel the need to have to be. But would we even look at his pictures in the same way? I don't think we would.
No, I think you're right.
Everybody's clamouring to be the loudest, the brightest, the best.
Yeah.
And none of that noise, we're just bubbling.
Yeah.
There are very few people at the moment who are kind of like shooting out the top, going, this is my work, this is my passion. It's all about collecting, followers, fans, getting a market. How did we do it in years gone by before social media?
Remember the Yellow Pages?
I do remember the Yellow Pages. I used to have an advert in the Yellow Pages.
And we'll return to Paul shortly. There are now 2 photo walks a week, Friday's episode, this one, and Wednesday's Extra Mile for our Extra Mile patrons who, without you, the show wouldn't be what it is. So thank you. You are very much of my team, along with our precious sponsors, because a program like this has become a full-on production. Plus, we meet once a month for the InVision show on Zoom. We have guest speakers. A forthcoming one, actually, is Lynn Fraser, talking about her trip to South Sudan and Ethiopia, making photographs that were colourful, that were noisy, that were many things. Questions also from my roll of 12 and an invite to share the pictures you've been making.
On this week's Extra Mile.
I did hint that this Extra Mile episode, number 26, though there are 100 other shows available too, that Extra Mile 26 was or is the most personal story I think I've told to date. I go in search of my mum, my blood mother, to tell a photo story. Someone who, I haven't seen for 55 years. And I find something on her grave that I wasn't expecting. Difficult to read. So, in loving memory of Marlene, that's right, it should be 1947. Yes, it is. 1987. Devoted mother to... I talk often on this show in the Extra Mile about the personal nature of making our pictures, and it's a balancing act, this one, as I want to share the story without making it too much of a self-indulgent social media me-fest. I am trying to be careful how I say that, probably failing spectacularly, but hey-ho. And then my Shooting the Breeze conversation is with news and social photographer Brad Wakefield, in a conversation about one of the hardest subjects you can photograph.
And he had a minute, and I stood completely still. And I raised, because the cameras, they're really quiet these days. Yeah. I raised my camera. I took a shot of the gentleman stood there. He threw the flower in, because this stuff happened so quickly. He threw the flower in and turned and looked at me.
That's the Extra Mile, which you'll find by clicking on the Support the Show icon on the front of the website at photowalk.show. And thank you to all those who are making this show a weekly adventure with our cameras, including our friends at MPB.
For quality used and inspected photo and video kit with a 6-month guarantee upon what you buy, visit mpb.com.
It's the Friday Photo Walker special this week as I walk and talk with my guests. Of course, other weeks you'll know that your letters, your pictures also make the show what it is, a story of life made by photographers from all over the world. So be sure to keep sending your stories in, please, about what photography and picture making means to you. Send them to stories@photowalk.show. And if you're sending pictures, 2,500 pixels wide, please, whatever shape you shoot. And if you don't know how to resize them, you can just send me the originals and I'll do the legwork for you. So it's a special this week as I walk with Paul Sanders, former pictures editor with The Times. Paul runs very unique, very special mindfulness retreats for those who want to find their still, their quiet with a camera. And he asks on his website, so where did our awareness go? These days we shoot to please others. We look for validation from social media and competitions, becoming judgmental on ourselves when we don't win or receive enough likes. And that's a reason I've followed Paul's work so closely for a while now. Because while I do like a faster pace of much of the work I shoot professionally, it's the quieter moments alone in, say, woodland where we walk on a Friday with a show, or a mountain in Norway close to Lillehammer where just a gentle whisper of a breeze through the pines comes to the fore, or the River Gambia in Western Africa where the only sound you hear is the gentle lapping of the water in the mangroves. They're the moments where being able to hear your own breath as you press a shutter reminds you of how special making pictures is and can be for us. So let's return to Paul Sanders, who I will link to on today's show notes on the show page, on photowalk.show, of course. so you can follow more of his work and what he does. Plus, of course, we have quite extensive notes on everything that's discussed on the programme too. Let's talk about genres. Ooh. Because you mentioned the word landscape.
Yes.
But I don't think of you as a landscape photographer.
I don't think of myself as a landscape photographer.
Yeah, although I suppose if somebody was trying to work out what your photography is, they'd probably be bound to attach landscape to it in some form.
Yeah.
But what is your genre?
I honestly don't know. I'm just a photographer.
Well, do you have to have one?
I don't think you do. I mean, labels are one of those things that are, we have to have a label these days, don't we? We have to name and label everything just so we know what's in it in case we have an allergic reaction.
And also for Google.
For Google, yes. You have to have your SEO correct. When I was working a lot with Fuji, when I first started with them, they used to say that I was their long exposure black and white landscape photographer.
Oh, that's a long label on a door. Can you imagine an office door with that on it?
Well, I needed a really big office. But
you hadn't changed much at all, had you?
Not at all. I just class myself as a photographer.
Yeah.
I don't particularly like photographing people because I'm quite shy, but I enjoy the conversation with people, so I do portraits.
Yeah.
I am just a photographer. I don't do anything commercial anymore, so just the word photographer is enough for me. Although I think on my Instagram it says artist, but I struggle with that word a little bit because it just sounds a little bit pretentious sometimes. Photographer is normalising what I do.
Yeah.
If I had to give myself a label, it would just be enjoyer of nature.
Yeah, that's a nice one.
But I think these days we have to try and fit into a box that other people can use to define us.
Yeah.
So I think some genres are put for that. I mean, if you look back at the work of many great photographers, we've identified them as certain sorts of photographer. They weren't that sort of photographer particularly. Ansel Adams did still life as much as he did landscape.
Yeah.
And there's no shame in crossing genres and trying out new ideas. Where the difficulty comes is other people accepting you're trying something new. I got to a point where I sort of got a bit bored with my long exposure work, and I started doing more of the sort of stuff that I'm doing today. And I had a number of messages from people on social media saying, can you go back to what you're good at?
What? How did you feel about that? That's a bit insulting.
Yeah, I mean, it is insulting, and it's, I remember one message in particular where the person had said, I only follow you for your long exposures.
Yeah.
So if you don't do that, I'm going to unfollow you. And I was thinking, well,
please unfollow.
I don't really care enough to just shift, just to keep one person happy or to keep any people happy. The happiness is for me. I photograph for me. I create for creation's sake, just things that please me.
Where does the business fit into this? Because you've said something there that has occurred to me of late with this podcast.
Yeah.
I had an episode, a few episodes ago, and it was for me, it was a mammoth download, and I thought, we've arrived. That sounded like Brian Blessed then. We've arrived. But then the following week wasn't so good. Then it dipped, then it went up, then it dipped, and I thought, and it was a real sort of wake-up call for me to think, hang on, are you doing this podcast as a business? Are you doing it because you genuinely love it? Because I do. Are you doing it because it's kind of a throwback to the absolute joy that I had working in radio? Why are you doing it? And I've come out the other side of that thinking, no, I'm doing it because I genuinely love doing it, but I shouldn't feel embarrassed. I also want to make it my business, and I'm finding that bit a bit tricky, to be honest.
Yeah, it feels somewhat self-indulgent at times,
it does.
I think.
Yes.
Are
you talking about me there?
No, I'm talking about me. But you can be self-indulgent too. We can be self-indulgent together. I think, I stopped doing commercial work about 8 years ago.
Right.
I won't take commissions for anything. I have no interest in making a ton of money from photography.
Right.
Which is probably a good job because, I don't meet that many photographers who do make a ton of money from it. I photograph because I absolutely love it. Would I still photograph if I didn't have any kind of following or wasn't doing any workshops? Yes, 100%. Because it's a passion. I enjoy the business side of it, if we call it a business, the workshop side and the retreats. I really enjoy it. I love sharing ideas with other photographers and artists and writers and learning from them as much as they learn from me. I find that sort of cross-pollination process incredible. In a perfect world, if I had money behind me, I would do the workshops for free.
Yeah. Look at this tree. This Y-shaped tree. Look at that.
Look at this. That's got that fibrous thing as well, the twisty.
You've got me wanting to touch it.
Go on touch it. Go on.
Please keep talking to me while I'm touching the tree.
Neil's going to hug the tree now.
No, but look at it. Look.
Yeah.
I mean, it starts at so that doesn't look like the southern. Where were we anyway? We were talking about the business and while I'm touching this tree.
I think the thing is that we often think we have to do things in a certain way, and workshops can be used as a way to encourage you, to give yourself permission to not do something a certain way.
Yeah.
To try something new in a safe environment.
Yes.
Because it's quite frightening to try and break out of a format that works for individuals on your own. Whereas if you go and you share the experience with other people, you get a little bit of instant feedback from people, you get encouraged. And there's a lot of discouragement in photography. A lot of discouragement. There's a lot of ego, a lot of protectiveness of not only locations and techniques and things. And in some respects, I understand that because we all have to have our unique bit. But when I first started in photography, I remember a couple of the sort of older, more experienced photographers literally spending time with me explaining the way they did things and how they balanced flash and daylight, and differential focusing. And I thought, I would never be the photographer I am now if somebody hadn't taken me under their wing and gone, actually, Paul, you could have made this like this and done that and tried that. And if you use this technique, or if you put a piece of bubble wrap over your flash gun, you get a really lovely soft dappled light, which makes it look like sunlight. And, try this idea and those kind of things. That's what workshops are for. They're for sparking ideas. People often go to workshops thinking they've got to come back with a great photograph. That's not why you do a workshop. A workshop is to thrash out something. It's to wrestle the crocodile in the mud, and come out of it, a little bit like Crocodile Dundee. This is a knife. But the expectation that people have of going on a workshop is, I'm going to invest in your workshop if you deliver me a fantastic photograph. I deliver a learning experience.
Yeah.
I deliver an experience that's quite personal.
Well, it's only since you pointed out to me this sinuous tree back there, and as we came up the path, I thought, oh my word, there's one that's even trumped the one that we found before, I think.
It has. I mean, I particularly love the way it all goes into the leaves with the new shoots coming through. I love that. And this bit round here, that's just fabulous.
Are these bluebells or snowdrops?
These are bluebells.
Bluebells.
I am going to maybe commit something to Polaroid.
Well, you're going to make a picture. Right, let me move my
I have no idea.
Clipboard of questions, none of which I've actually asked you so far, really.
I know, you've got this clipboard. It's like I'm with the Ofsted inspector.
I've done all this research.
I don't even know whether there's any film left on it, but we'll see.
Right.
So what I really like is just this bit down here where the trunk goes into the ground, and it sort of looks like the hooves of an animal, just sort of...
Oh, this bit does. Yeah. Here, look.
It's like the cloven hoof of something.
That's very goat-like.
It is goat-like.
Yeah.
So there might be one frame left on this, and I have another film in my pocket.
Okay.
But you might not get anything because I've lost count of how many frames I took the other day.
It's a bit like Harry Callahan. I've clean forgotten. Was it 5 or 6?
I don't know. It's like, let's see what happens.
Go on. It was Harry Callahan, wasn't it? Who was Dirty Harry?
Dirty Harry.
Harry Callahan?
It was Harry Callahan, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood.
Yes.
Let's see.
Heralded by that beautiful Jet Ranger above us.
I won't take it until the Jet Ranger has gone. This is so imperfect. I love it. I've actually got a crack in the viewfinder as well. So
have you?
Whether this will actually yield what I have in mind, I don't know. Ooh,
There was one.
there was one. Don't you just love that sound?
Yeah. Wow.
And even though these are black and white, I love the fact they're blue.
Yes, it's blue.
And then it's going to take, because it's so cold, it's going to take about 40 minutes to develop.
Right.
So I shall put it in my pocket.
Yeah.
And
Warm it up.
And then just sort of see what happens.
You're not supposed to wave them around, are you?
No, you don't wave them around because apparently the inks and dyes.
Because that was
and
the
things.
old thing with Polaroid.
Yeah,
wave.
Well, you always look like a photographer. You're waving a Polaroid, or you'd stick it under your arm.
Right.
But I'm just gonna,
Neither of which you're going to do.
no, I'm just going to put it in my pocket
Yeah.
and hope that I don't squish it. and if I do squish it, it's okay.
Yeah, because it's even more imperfect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, I do. What I really like about them is, I do emulsion separations.
Oh, wow.
So,
right.
And it was something that I used to play with when I was at college, and I'd forgotten the pleasure of mucking around with something.
Take me through the process of that.
So emulsion separation is a process that when you've taken the Polaroid film and the images, you cut the white frame off,
Yep.
or the black frame, or the pink frame, depending on which brand of their film you've bought that day, and then you put the square into warm water, and gradually the plastic backing peels off the front, and then the emulsion is a very thin layer.
At this stage, it is a fully developed.
Yes.
Right.
So you've got the fully developed image.
Yes.
You've cut the edges off. It's in the hot water, and gradually the water starts to pull the emulsion off the plastic, and then you're left with this kind of amorphous blob in the warm water. And then you slide a piece of paper, watercolor paper, or any kind of paper, underneath it, and then you stretch the emulsion over the paper. So you end up with an image that may be underexposed, may be overexposed because of the nature of a Polaroid, and then you've stretched it and pulled it, and so it's never quite square.
It's going to lose all its shape. It's not going to look like the original picture.
No.
Very abstract.
Yeah, it can be really abstract, but they're so beautiful.
Yeah.
They look so fragile and delicate.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful to do because it's so tactile.
And then you remove the paper and
Let it dry.
Let it dry.
And
It will cockle probably, won't it?
depend if you've got good quality watercolor paper. No, but if it does cockle, then you can iron it lightly and see what happens. You can then paint on it and draw on it and go even further into it.
Yeah.
Because photography doesn't have to be the finished thing, and I appreciate that for a lot of people, the photograph is it.
Yes.
But for some people, it's only the start. It's the start of a creative expression. It doesn't have to be the end. But often we get very limited by the fact that photographs come in specific shapes.
Yep.
And we like those white edges to be sharp and crisp. And if you look at some of Joe Cornish's more recent work, he doesn't have perfect edges, and he writes on his pictures and he draws on them.
Does he?
Yeah.
I've not seen this.
He did.
I thought I was quite familiar with Joe's work.
He did a fantastic exhibition at Brimham Rocks,
Right.
where he did layers of photographs and some drawing and some writing, and he did have one in the Joe Cornish Gallery that was a woodland scene that he'd written all round and drawn in pencil, where the panorama had sort of, when you do a panorama and you stitch together, it's all,
it's all
he'd left it
jiggity-jaggities.
Yeah, he'd left it all jiggity-jaggedy.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he'd written in and drawn in bits.
Yes. Oh.
For me, that's his best work.
Wow.
And I hope Joe won't be offended, but a lot of the stuff that is Joe Cornish trademark is very much of a formula that works.
Yeah.
But there's a real expression, a real Joe-ness to... I don't even know if that's a word.
You said it is
yeah.
now.
Yeah, it must be. I can see his personality in those where he's made his individual mark. Where he's said, right, this isn't a control P or a command P or an Apple P or whatever it is. This is hand finished by me, one of one. It's unique, can never be repeated in its original form.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to sort of pursue with my own photography, is there's a uniqueness, because it's very easy. We can all go and do the same pictures of the same things and hopefully get a similar light. But the thing that I think is important for photographers is unique expression. We are sort of all individuals, and we need to create as individuals. Yes, learn from each other, be inspired by each other, work with each other, share ideas, ask people who are experts in the field that you're choosing for advice, go on their workshops. But take what they say as the starting point of your own exploration, your own brave step into the unknown.
I've just seen something as you're talking. Oh, sorry.
We make something that truly represents how we feel. That is an old tennis ball.
Yeah, I just realised that.
You thought it was a robin, didn't you? It has got a red breast.
Have I? Oh, I've just ruined the moment. You mentioned much earlier in our conversation, and it's something I'm beginning to get quite passionate about now too, about the fact that you come sometimes into the woods and you write.
Yes.
You don't photograph.
Yes.
What are you writing?
It's usually experience.
Okay.
So what am I experiencing now? What can I hear? What can I smell? What can I feel? How do I feel? What catches my eye or captures my imagination? It's engaging all of my other senses. I love the feel of actually putting pen to paper or pencil to paper. There's a real connection with the world as you sort of sit down and you have to pause. It's very difficult to write and walk.
Yes.
So I love the fact that it makes me pause. It makes me really slow down. Often in my workshops, I encourage people to write before we photograph. To make even if it's just a bullet point, just make a bullet point list of all the things that you become aware of as you stand in a place.
So had we stood before that tree as we did a moment ago, maybe we'd have written long form or bullet form, some sort of idea about our feelings or what we were seeing or
feelings, what we saw, what we could hear, what caught your attention first.
Yes.
What the tree looked like. I mean, it was that beautiful Y shape, wasn't it?
Yeah.
With that sort of sinuous twist.
Yeah.
And even if you just write down the words, it sort of starts to conjure something in your head. There's there's a magic. Poetry and photography are one and the same thing because they are both based on a real experience. You have to have experienced something to be able to write about it in a way that conveys that emotion to somebody else. As a photographer, you have to be in a location, unless you're using AI, to be able to convey what that experience of being stood in front of that Y-shaped tree, for instance, meant to you. And if you're devoid of feeling about anything, then people are going to look at your pictures and pass them by. If your pictures are authentically how you felt at that particular time, people will pause. So many people on the club circuit have to write about their pictures. They have to put in a title. And they always struggle afterwards to write a title, to give the picture a name. Whereas if you spent 5 minutes before you actually made the picture writing down all the things that you're aware of, the title is in there. And all you need to do is mess around with the words and the order of the words, and all of a sudden you've got a poem. A poem can be one word, or it can be verses and verses. It doesn't have to be something that rhymes or is clever. It just has to be about your experience of being there. You don't have to share it with anybody. But you say the word poetry. I do a photography and poetry workshop in Cornwall. We stay in a little farmhouse, and I just say to people, work with your sense of place. What does this place feel like to you? What does it mean to you? What does it tell you? What does it ask of you?
That sounds a wonderful workshop to be on, poetry and photography.
It's very beautiful. I work with a lovely poet.
Wow.
A Cornish lady called Joey Hewlin.
Yeah.
And, she creates the most amazing energy.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say I'm a good writer. I struggle with grammar. I do have... there's one lady who Sometimes after I put my newsletter out, she'll send me back my mistakes, which I quite like. It makes
That wouldn't be our Lynn Fraser, would it?
No.
It sounds a Lynny thing
it
to
does
do.
sound like Lynn, yes, but no.
Sorry, Lynn. Slight in-joke, but one of our very esteemed other listeners.
Yes. No, she doesn't correct my spelling, thankfully, although she probably should. But spelling doesn't matter. Grammar doesn't matter. It's like in photography. Exposure doesn't matter. Focus doesn't matter.
Yeah.
None of it matters if it conveys the feeling. There's so many links, but people go, it's poetry, I don't do poetry, I don't do writing. But actually, yes, we do. We might not take pen to paper anymore in the same way that we used to, because we all write on texts and social media and emails. But we all write every day in the same way that we all photograph nearly every day. So why shouldn't that be a way of letting off some of your creative energy?
Yeah.
It's a strange thing, this fear that we have of not being good enough at something, therefore I won't try it. The number of people who come on a workshop and I say, can you let's just write a few words down.
Yeah.
I don't do writing. I'm not very good at it. But they're the most amazing writers. There was one chap on a little workshop I did, and he said, I don't do writing. So look, just go off and stand quietly and just make a mental note of things if you don't want to write it down. He came back and he used words that were so beautiful to describe the experience of standing next to a lake in a small woodland.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I thought you didn't do writing. He went, well, I don't. He said, but I listened and I just jotted down a few notes. I said, but you read those notes out, and it was literally a list. I said, but you read them out with such passion and emotion that they're a poem. They're not a poem, they're just a list. I said, what is a poem but just a list of words?
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's a list of words.
My conversations with Sean Tucker.
Yes.
We have a kind of cyclical conversation, I'm sure, every time we talk about this, but it's along the lines of what he likes to make as a film is a film about photographers.
Yeah.
And the philosophical side of photography.
Yes.
But what he knows will earn him the likes and the views and the subs are films about a camera and what's the best aperture and how do you photograph a chair.
Yeah.
With social media, I think that's become and we mentioned social media earlier, it's become a really difficult thing. And I've got a very dear friend who was going for 1,000 subscribers recently. And in fact, we talked to her last week on the Extra Mile show, and she couldn't really explain what it was about getting to that 1,000, but it was that kind of like, I just want to get there. What's your relationship with social media?
It's love-hate. Definitely love-hate. And I view it as a necessary evil. And I think it's quite interesting. I remember at the end of the year when everybody does their best 9.
Yes. I've never done that.
On Instagram.
I don't have 9.
No, you've got much more than 9. Or many more than 9. But I remember Kevin Mullins put up his most liked 9 pictures, and I think sort of 6 of them were camera pictures. And that, to me, says everything about, Kevin is an exceptionally gifted photographer, has a beautiful eye. Yes. His pictures convey emotion and moment and feeling, and that fleeting second that something happened, he's like a magician. Yeah. But for a man of his capability to have some of his best 9 pictures as pictures of cameras, photography is about the image. Social media, Instagram used to be about the image.
Yeah.
Now it's about... I have no idea where we are.
No, we've gone round in circles.
Have we?
I think so. I'm beginning to recognise bits of it, and I often say this on my podcast. If we're here in a few more hours' time, it might turn into Blair Witch.
It could well do. It could well do. I think we'll go left.
There's an ominous shadow in the woods over there, which I don't like very
I'm going to
much.
start running around with a torch under my face. Yeah, but I think, when Instagram started, it was about sharing photographs.
Yes, yeah.
And the same with Flickr. Flickr is much more about sharing photography, less about sharing pictures of kit. So my feeling about social media is, yes, it's good, and I get the whole thing about, getting to 1,000 subscribers. You look at it and you think, I'm only 3 away from whatever number it is. It'd be really nice. Why I need to get there, I don't know. Does it make me a better photographer if I have more? No. Certainly looking at some accounts who have hundreds of thousands, it's not about the photography.
No.
And that makes me sound a bit sort of, maybe a bit bitter or whatever. And it's not a bitterness. It's that somewhere along the line, photography has become less about the image, more about the personality, and more about the kit than the creations that come from using the kit.
Yeah.
It's like that whole thing, you make a really nice picture, you must have a great camera.
Yeah.
And no, you've just seen my tatty blinking Polaroid. The Hasselblad that I'm using now was made in 1972.
Yeah.
It's got all sorts of bits hanging off it. And that's not me saying I'm a great photographer, but it's not the kit that makes the photographer. It's what is between their ears and behind their eyes and in their heart.
But are there ever times, and going back to Sean, that when Sean thinks, I might as well just make films about cameras because it gets so many more subs and I make more money out of YouTube? Are there ever moments where Discover Still might be much, much more lucrative if it was Discover f-stops?
Oh yeah, it's always the thing. If niches are naturally small.
Yeah.
And I think I could make much more money being much more commercially minded about it, but I'm not. I'm just not a businessman. And I would do this for free. I genuinely mean that. I wish I could afford to do what I really enjoy for nothing, because the people that I work with, certainly the ones that I do a lot of work with, West Kent Mind, the mental health charity. The people that I'm working with there, they can't afford to come on a workshop, even a kind of couple of £100 for a one-day workshop. They don't have the money because their mental health is of such a large factor in their life that they can't work. Some of them can't even go outside. And yet these people get so much from the photography. And for them, it's not about the camera. It's about what they see and how they reconnect with the world. I had one client on that work, the last workshop I did with them, who she hadn't been outside her house for nearly 3 years.
Good Lord.
And she came on the workshop. It was done on Zoom, and I asked them to choose a colour. Choose a colour that represents how you feel.
Right.
Not your favourite colour, just how do you feel, and give it a colour. And she chose pink. The next week she came along, and there was a picture taken from in the street of a pink sky. And I said to her, that's a lovely sunset. She said, yeah. She said, I was really frustrated because I looked through the window and I couldn't get it. I saw it light the wall. She said, and I couldn't make the pink work. She said, and I turned around and I saw the pink sunshine, pink sky. She said, so I opened my window and tried to get it. I couldn't do it. I opened the front door and couldn't do it. And I ended up having to go into the street to photograph it. And I said, you went outside? She said, I haven't been outside for years. She said, and it was magical.
Yes.
She said, and that was all down to this colour that you gave me.
Extraordinary.
And I said, but I didn't give it to you. You chose it. And she said, it's incredible. I now can get to the shops. Right? She goes to the shops using that exercise, looking at colour as a way of navigating her way to the shops. So photography is so much more than cameras.
It's counselling.
It's counselling, it's therapy, it's meditation, it's prayer, it's spiritual. It's a life force. And yet we get obsessed with how many million pixels we've got, and you think, oh my goodness, it's so much more than this. Yes, the clever guys who make the sensors and put them together so they have, a wonderful kind of sharp edge or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to them for doing it. But we as photographers don't need to know all that.
No.
We just need to know that when we press the button, what we're going to look at comes out the way that we feel it. And we get so obsessed with all the background, how sharp my lens is at the edge. The joy of old lenses was the fact they weren't sharp at the edges.
It was.
And there was a wonderful sort of clarity to areas of them. And now people spend a fortune on old lenses to put onto really expensive sensors to bring the quality down.
And we had lots of grain.
Don't you just love grain? One of the people I follow on Instagram is a guy called Kit Young. I don't know if you've met.
No.
He's a photographer. I think he might live in Paris. Certainly between East Anglia and Paris. He makes the most beautiful pictures, all shot on an old Leica. One of the things that he does is on his Instagram feed, he shows the grain, close-ups of the grain.
Right.
Oh, honestly, his work is magical.
Yeah.
But he just has this way of just showing you what the grain brings to a picture. There's an aliveness to his images because of the grain. There's a softness and an ambiguity to some of them because of the way the grain is formed.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah.
It's when we see things we don't see in ultra high definition. You look at these woods now.
Yeah.
As you go further back, you can't tell one branch from another.
No.
They're just blobs.
No.
That's how film renders it. So I think there's a love of imperfection and embracing all of that and embracing the whole idea that what you're looking at now is a story of now. I photograph something, I'm telling my story of now, this moment. And in 100 years' time, somebody might discover a box of pictures and go, wow, in those days they had satellite dishes on their houses, or look at the road furniture. Yeah. And yet we spend hours taking it out, or some people do, deleting stuff that is actually relevant to now.
Yeah.
If you were an alien and you landed here in 100 years' time, you look at some photographs and you go, wow, how did they know which side of the road to drive on? I mean, not that an alien would need to worry about that, but, we're almost erasing the story of now.
Yes.
By removing things that we don't like. And actually what we're doing is airbrushing out stuff. And we all go up in arms when, people change the words in a Roald Dahl book. But nobody blinks an eye because we take out a bit of graffiti or a satellite dish or whatever.
Yes.
Photographs are authentic records of history to me. Yes, there's a creative side to it, and I'm not talking about that so much. But I think, it's important that we embrace what we have, accept the way the world is today, and tell that story, rather than this idea that the world is a perfect place with no distractions, when actually we're permanently distracted.
Yeah.
It's really been lovely walking with you, with the phone on silent, not pinging away or nothing, just chatting, listening to the birds, stopping to hug a tree.
Yes, we did.
Actually, shall I show you my favourite tree?
Yeah.
We can get to this way. We're very close. It's my favourite tree in these woods.
Back for the final part of my conversation with Paul Sanders in a moment. But it being the first Friday of the month, it is time to set our assignment for the month of March. Is it March already? Surely not. This month, my guest to set it is Tim Booth, who in episode 367 talked about his amazing Show of Hands project. Let's hear what he's asking us to look out for and photograph.
The Photowalk assignment.
Often when I ask a photographer for an assignment, I know exactly what they're going to say before they say it, because they've told me. But yours is a surprise entirely to me.
Right. Okay. So I don't want people to go off and photograph anything particular.
Right.
What I want them to try and photograph is the most important thing in photography, without which we would have no photography. I'd like them to photograph light. Because until you understand light, you're just burrowing about in the dark. And I think if you have to try and photograph, and it doesn't matter whether it's a light bulb or the way the light falls on something, so it doesn't matter what that thing is, but focus on the light before anything else, and then try and make the light the photograph.
Fascinating. You love black and white.
Mm-hmm.
Are you asking?
Absolutely not. No, it doesn't matter whether it's colour or black and white.
Right.
It really doesn't.
Square format, portrait, landscape, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, because the thing is, if you get the light right and it works, it will work as a colour picture, it'll work as a landscape, you'll be able to crop it to square, you'll be able to do anything you like, because you've got the gem already. How you then frame it and how you colour it is up to you, but get the light.
So send your entries to stories@photowalk.show with some words about your entry if you feel so inclined, and links to your social media channels so that we can share them. They'll appear on photowalk.show under the features tab. Just look for assignments, you'll find them in there. So once more, send them to stories@photowalk.show. 2,500 pixels wide, please, if you can manage. And there's a famous, not so famous show flask for the one that raises my eyebrows. Right, let's return to my guest, Paul Sanders, for the final part of our chat. And we will be playing out at the end of a challenging question to him with our play out song. That song that we always finish our walks with. Not necessarily always the same one, but some music just to continue our walk together and make some more pictures too. It's going to be Harry Keyworth's For Another this week. But you'll remember I was walking through the woodland with Paul, and he said, well, let me show you my favourite tree. I wonder whether I would be able to identify what Paul Sanders' favourite tree is. But having said that, that's ridiculous, because it's all subjective, isn't it?
It is.
My favourite tree won't be yours, vice versa, and so on.
Well, I hope not, because I don't like doing sharing.
If I pick yours as my favourite tree, then is that going to upset you?
No, I'll give it to you. I'll gift my favourite tree to you.
I don't want that tree anymore. I'm going to find my own tree.
That's it, yeah. My tree's not good enough for you. I know what it's like.
It's not this one ahead of us, is it?
It is, yeah, this beautiful oak.
I'm sorry, you can still have it.
Are you sure? Do you not like it?
I love it, but I don't want to take it from you. Look at the shape of that. We were talking about trees lit from above a few months ago. And I can see how this would be in the dead of night, lit from above.
Yeah, the moonlight on this. It's an incredibly eerie place.
What is it about this tree then?
I just love the fact that it's kind of like reaching up to the sky.
Yeah.
And it literally is kind of doing this kind of massive heart opening thing, going, here I am.
Yeah.
This is me. I am enough as I am.
Well, there is not another tree like it.
There isn't. I mean, it's incredible.
I mean that.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. In the space of all of these trees. I mean, this little area of woodland was bombed really heavily during the war.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. They were trying to hit the railway line, but they missed. So this is called Bomber's Wood, this little bit. And that tree, I think, is one that was there from before. And then a lot of the new ones, you'll notice they're not as big.
No, they're not.
So there's a lot of new growth, or growth from sort of splintered bits.
So much of this wood was decimated during the war.
Yeah, there was an ammunition dump in here as well that they were trying to hit. There are bits of it where you can still see some of the old road. But I just love it. It's like it's celebrating just being alive.
Yeah.
And it's got bits that are dead and bits that are alive and bits that are broken. And in many ways, it sort of reminds me a lot of me, which is quite strange, because there are bits of me that are broken. There are bits of me that are, sort of largely dying or dead. There are bits that I don't like to look back on, but the rest of me now is just celebrating the aliveness of me, the simple joy of being able to walk around, make photographs of things, see shapes and patterns and textures, and celebrate that I'm alive in a world that is alive.
Yeah.
And make photographs that share that joy.
I'm not sure how you'll react to this question, because it's something I learned only about this morning. And you might say, Neil, I don't really want to share that. But you were offered a chance to go back into your old world. Yes, or the opportunity. I won't sort of say where or whatever. No, I wasn't expecting you to, no.
And
It might still be a decision you need to tell them, so that's why I'm being a bit...
No. It's definitely it's not going to happen. But there's a really weird part of you that thinks you can go back.
Yeah.
And actually, lying awake at sort of 4 this morning, realising that I couldn't, with the anxiety rising about it.
Was it really?
Yeah. Proper anxiety. And, my partner explaining that there'd be no longer an ask if I did go back.
Really? Is that because she doesn't like that world?
No, it's because she doesn't like the me that it turns out.
Right.
And I completely get that, because I didn't like the me that was then. Now I don't think I have the killer instinct to do that job.
No. Listening to you now, I can't believe you would.
Well, if there wasn't a tree in the office to hug, then there's no, no point.
Yeah.
I've moved on.
Yeah.
And I've moved on such a long way that I can look back at where I was, when I left the Times and the dark years afterwards, and I can truly see an evolution in me, most importantly as a person. And as a father and partner. I'm a human being.
Again.
Yeah, where I wasn't. I was just existing in a person-shaped shell, but I wasn't a human being.
I think I might have been a bit disappointed had you gone back to that world. Not that should make any difference to you, but it would have been.
In which case, I won't go back.
It would have been a bit of a
Yeah.
Or would it have been a oh?
Yeah, I would have felt a complete fraud to myself and to people that I've spoken to about it, because it is okay to move on.
Yes.
It's okay not to have the bright lights and the kudos and the huge sort of credibility that things like that bring you. A simple life is often the most successful life.
Is there a part of you? Because I think back to my broadcasting days, which were so much more glamorous.
Yes.
I remember saying to my mum and dad, the record company, what was it? What record company? I can't remember. But anyway, Neil Diamond was playing in town. He was at the Royal Albert Hall. Okay, it was a big gig, very important gig, very difficult to get tickets for, but I got some. And I said to my mum and dad, would you like to go? And Dad was like, whoa, no, really? Because he was a big Neil Diamond fan. And I said, even better than that, the record company are going to pick you up in a stretched Rolls Royce. I can't do that sort of thing these days. Is there a part of me that misses some of those days? Yeah. I can't lie. There is some, and walking through they're not polished brass anymore, but walking through the polished brass doors of Broadcasting House was like, you've arrived, my son.
Yeah, there's a
buzz.
And
I there is a buzz, and there's a feeling that, and it wasn't made easy when I went back to a reunion. One of the DJs, one of the broadcasters, said to me, how did you become a wedding photographer? So there is a part of me that thinks, but I don't miss it. At the same time.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that's similar. Sorry, that was the longest question in history.
That's okay.
As similar for you, maybe?
Very. I mean, I've been asked, when I do talks, I do, to the camera clubs, and I do my one about the newspapers. People at the end, one of the questions that's do you feel like a failure for leaving?
Oh.
There's a part of me that sometimes thinks, could I have stuck it out? Could I have seen it through? And that's only my ego going, yeah, you could have done it. But no, I don't feel like a failure. I actually feel more successful for walking away than staying, because I found something in me that was so dormant that was burying. And I think when a big story breaks, I think, that would be, there is no better place to work or be when a huge story breaks and a newspaper comes to life, and you have people who are the best at what they do, doing the best that they can do, and everybody's going in the right direction. The worst days to work in a newspaper are the days when it's a quiet news day.
Yeah.
Because everybody's scratching around trying to find something to do, to make their mark, to be noticed.
And getting grumpy, probably.
Getting very grumpy.
Yeah.
Whereas when a big story happens, everybody seems to just know, the gears click in and everybody knows what the end goal is.
Yeah.
And it's a real it's an incredible rush to work in that environment. And then you go out the next day and you see people reading what you've done, looking at the photographs that either you've taken or you've researched, or the photographers you put in the right positions to get the pictures that the people are looking at. And then there's always something missing though, because the next day you've got 96 blank pages again.
You've got to start.
There's no, and impermanence is a wonderful thing. I love impermanence, but I like making things. I like creating stuff that can be enjoyed, although not forever, because the nature of everything, that it rots down or hard drives crash or films fog or whatever. But I like making things. I like creating something that has a bit of me in it that isn't going to end up in the dustbin on the southeastern train from Victoria.
Yeah. You may then have already answered this question, but it's one I'm trying to unpick this year, and I'm challenging photographers and creatives and whoever I speak to answer this question. That could be poets in the end, I suppose, as well. What is your why?
Oh, I love that. What a great question. That is fantastic. My why is to find happiness.
Yeah.
That's it, happiness. I want to be happy in my world.
Yeah.
And I think the important thing is that happiness finds you. You don't find happiness. I thought that I would be happy working in a newspaper at a top job, and I was more unhappy than I've ever been. But put me out into the woods with a camera, I'm so happy. Stand me on a beach, listening to the waves, I'm happy. Happiness is my why. As simple as that. Fame and fortune, don't give two hoots. But to be able to wake up in the morning and know that I've hopefully not hurt anybody, offended anybody, that what I do, I absolutely love, that my son is safe, all those things. It's all about happiness, which sounds like a really kind of weak thing when you say it.
No, not at all.
But I think actually there's a strength in just wanting to be happy. I had a conversation a couple of days ago with my pensions advisor, because now I'm 55, I can start claiming some of my workplace pensions. One of the questions that they ask you about, sort of transferring your money out of one fund into another, was, what's your goal? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you might want to go and buy a fancy car or a boat, and I was like, I don't think it's quite that much money.
My word, I was going to say, how large is this pension?
I think
Sunseeker for one.
It's more of a rubber dinghy without a paddle. But I said to him, I just want to be happy.
Yes.
And he said, nobody's ever said they want to be happy. He said, you must want something. I said, well, no. I said, I've got everything I need. I said, I've got, reasonable health. I've got great life experience. I've got good friends. I've got a happy relationship. I've got a healthy son who seems to be staying reasonably on the straight and narrow. I said, what more do I need?
Yeah.
I said, if the money from this pension means that I can continue to be happy on the basics, then that's fine.
Yeah.
Don't need anything fancy.
Yeah.
We collect so much stuff.
Yeah.
That's what camera kit is. Stuff. It's just noise.
Do you know what? You may have suggested this to him. If you haven't, I'll happily do it for you. I will send him a voucher to come on one of your courses. I think he needs to understand that not everybody needs stuff.
No, I mean, that's the thing.
Did you tell him this, by the way?
Yes, I did.
Right.
Yeah, I did tell him that, no, we don't need stuff. Weirdly, though, I was a bit shocked the other day, because that was 2 weeks ago, that conversation, and then he phoned me on Monday to say that he'd quit. And I was like, oh.
He's now living in a yurt.
Yeah, with my pension.
So much laughter, hey. edge. I hope this is world again for each other. Take the tension to the bed and take me in. I hope these feelings again on each other.
Closing the show this week. My thanks to Paul Sanders for his work, his photographs, his thoughts, his retreats. Go to the show page, episode 371 today. There's links for him and links to other references made during our conversation today. Plus, there's some videos to sink yourself into as well. The Extra Mile is out, so if you'd like to walk some more with me, go across now to hear that on photowalk.show, and you'll find the Extra Mile page where you can join up. Final virtual fist bumps go to Neil Ford, head of stuff that only works after he's given it a reboot. Emily Renier for your eyes in our Facebook group. Andrea Gilpin, chief of staff on the Instagram and ideas floor, and to Artlist for the music this week. And I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you, and talking with you next time, when my guest will be just a beautiful photographic mind and adventurer from Australia, Simon Lister.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.